All right, welcome back to Bert's Basics. My name is Peter Burt. I teach at Box Elder High School. I teach medical anatomy and physiology. And today we're knocking out a couple more bullet points on the muscular system. So today we're doing origin insertions and agonists and antagonists. So these are the goals that we're going to cover. They're just a bunch of words. These words right here might look a little sketchy right here, but they're not too bad. You just kind of have to get used to saying them and then they'll be fine. So let's go ahead and start with origin insertion. Okay, so if I showed you this skeleton right here, okay, let me get my face out of here. Okay, you can see that's a pretty cool skeleton. And you'd look at it and be like, wow, Bert's kids took some Sharpies and put dots all over these. This skeleton is an origin and an insertion skeleton. Okay, so I don't have any of these in my room. I need to get one. They're kind of expensive, but these are really, really cool. So let me talk about what this is. So I like this question right here. Where does a muscle start? Okay, so if I take my biceps, so if you look at the webcam, if I take my biceps, we all know that it comes up here towards my shoulder, and it comes all the way down here towards my radius. Okay, so we know that it attaches in two different places. So if I ask you, well, where does it start and where does it end? I think everyone on the planet could have a different answer for that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to switch the word start and end to origin and insertion. And I think this will help you, excuse me, understand the difference between these two. So if we look at a muscle, well, let me move my face again. Okay, every muscle will have an origin insertion. The origin I always like to describe as an anchor. Okay, when a muscle contracts, okay, there's going to be one spot that basically stays stationary, and then the other spot's going to be the one that moves. Okay, so the spot that stays stationary, the spot that is the strongest spot, the spot that's has the least movement, that is the origin. Okay, helpful hint, by the way, if we're talking arms and legs, the origin tends to always be most proximal. If we're talking insertion, it tends to be most distal. Okay, so if, the origin is the anchor, okay, and that's in color red on these diagrams, and insertion then is the most movable part. Okay, that is the most movable. So that's your origin and insertion. So let me show you a picture and see if this makes a lot more sense. Okay. Whoa, holy cow, I got a lot of stuff on here. Hold on. All right, there we go. So if you look, here's my biceps brachii. We can see down here it has a tendon, which is attaching to my radius. And then up here it has a couple of tendons, because remember, this is a bicep, two-headed dragon. So this is attaching to your scapula, okay? And it's attaching to your coracoid process, but it doesn't really matter. You don't need to know those yet. But it's just attaching here and here. So when this biceps contracts, it's going to shorten. So now the question is, when my bicep contracts, who moves? And it's the radius moves. So since the radius is moving, that makes this the insertion point, because that's the part that's moving. And the part that stays the anchor is called the origin. Okay, that's the origin. So instead of doing always a start and an end, know that a muscle always has an origin and insertion. So if you're ever curious about a muscle, try to flex it. Once you flex it, the part that moves will be the insertion. The part that stays the same is always going to be the origin. Now this is going to be kind of tricky, because this bone right here is called the scapula. Okay, in this case, the scapula, okay, in this case, is the origin for the biceps brachii. But then we have muscles on our back, like our traps and our rhomboids, where then the scapula becomes the insertion. So bones sometimes are tricky, because sometimes they can be the origin for one muscle and the insertion for another. But all I need you to know is the following. Origin, when a muscle contracts, is the least movable. Okay, and an insertion is the most movable. So if you guys ever have a question, flex the muscle and see which one moves. And remember, the most distal tends to always be the insertion. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and start on these ones. Primary mover, okay, prime mover, which we also call the agonist, antagonist, synergists, and fixators. The easiest way to get these down is you have to remember that our muscles kind of oppose each other. They're kind of a pulley system. So what I mean by that, if we look at my arm, okay, if we look at my arm, there we go. Okay, when I take my arm and I flex it and I decrease an angle, okay, my biceps is going to do most of the work. Okay, that's the biceps on top. So what is my triceps doing when this is happening? He's kind of relaxing, okay? But what happens when I want my arm to go back? Well, then now my triceps has got to contract and my biceps has got to relax. So it's a pulley system. One works, the other relaxes. One works, the other relaxes. And it's a pulley system. You know this because what happens if you get tased? If you get tased, they both contract at the same time, and you look like a fish out of water, you're like, okay, and you will fall over. So just remember that, because that will help us out. So now you guys are ready for what we call the agonist versus antagonist. And it's this picture. Okay, when the muscle contracts, I know we have an origin, I know we have an insertion, but that's not what we're talking about. When a movement occurs, the muscle that does the biggest force, the number one muchacho, is called the agonist. Okay, he's called the agonist. So when I'm lifting this weight, oh man, that biceps is booming. That is the agonist. Agonist is the main force, the majority of the force in a movement. That's an agonist. The guy on the opposite side. Opposite side. Remember, anta is for anti, opposite. Opposite guy is called the antagonist. Okay? So remember, agonist, okay, the main mover, opposite side, antagonist. The way this gets a little confusing is what happens if I start to go my arm the other direction? Because can you see how the arm's going backwards now? Now when the arm's going backwards, guess what? The triceps is doing almost all the work. So the triceps is doing all the work. He now becomes the agonist, and then who's the guy on the opposite side? Antagonist. So these aren't just the same words you can use again and again. It depends on the motion. So here's what we want to memorize. If I'm an agonist, whatever motion I'm doing, I am number one. I am the top dog. If I'm the antagonist, I'm on the other side. Okay? Then it just depends on what motion you're in. So if you really want to study these very well, you have to know what context they're being used in. The agonist, top dog, number one in the movement. Antagonist, the opposite of. Okay? Good. Let's do the next one. Okay? So the next one what we have is, if we look at these muscles here, okay, I have my biceps brachii. If you notice I'm flexing, right, going up. So this is my primary mover. We know my triceps is on the other side, so he's my antagonist. But do you see how there's other muscles here? Okay, these other muscles are called synergists. Now syn, it means together, and erg means to work. So the synergists are your backup singers, okay? So if I'm going to flex my arm, okay, there's a lot more muscles working than just my biceps, but biceps is number one, which makes him the agonist. Everyone else who helps him is called a synergist. So if you look at your synergist, the definition is muscles that help the prime mover. They're the background people. So if you look at your quads, there are 4 quadricep muscles. You know out of the 4, there's only one agonist, and then the other 3 have to be synergists, okay? And that's what we'll learn when we learn our quadricep muscles. The rectus femoris is your agonist. Biceps brachii is your agonist. The rest are all synergists, okay? You guys did a good job on that. Now let's go ahead and do fixators. Now, we tie it all together, okay? I'm flexing, so I know I have my biceps, which is so here's my biceps, so this is my agonist, okay? I know that I have my triceps, this is my antagonist. We're okay with that, okay? I know that I have my brachialis, which is assisting the primary mover, so we'll call him the synergist. We know that this tendon's getting pulling on this bone, and this bone is moving, so we'll call this the insertion point down here of your biceps brachii. And we know that up here is your origin of the biceps brachii, because that's where he's going to be attached to, okay? But now let's talk about this. Your deltoid is flexing, yet he's not causing any of this motion down here. Okay, this is the last term you need, which is a fixator. Now, fixators, I don't want to say they're the least important. They are super important, but as far as test questions go, they're the hardest to test on. So fixators, they do the following. They stabilize everything while the motion is being done. So think about if I'm doing an arm workout. If I'm doing an arm workout, I have my upper chest contracting, but it's contracting to stabilize my shoulders so that my agonist and antagonist can go to town. So fixators just make sure everything runs smoothly. So let's talk about our words one more time. Primary mover, top dog, number one. Okay, he's also called let me back up a little bit. He's also called the agonist, okay? Antagonist does the opposite motion of, and it depends on what you're doing, okay? Synergist assists the agonist. Okay, remember, antagonists go against the agonist, synergists go with the agonist, okay? And fixators, they stabilize the pointer region to make sure that the motion can actually take place. All right, hopefully those words aren't too bad now, so do me a favor, go ahead and knock out this quiz really quick. So you got here, there's a muscle. I want to know which one's the origin, which one's the insertion. Then here's the matching section for all those 4 big words you just memorized. And thanks for coming. Remember, guys, come back here often, learn as much as you possibly can. The answer key's coming up, so I'll see you on the flip side. Thanks, guys.